So one encounter that I recall, I was giving an artist talk at the San Francisco Arts Institute, which is an educational institution here in the Bay Area. In fact, one of the prominent ones. And a lot of my work deals with the intricacies of interactions between race and gender. And after the artist talk was finished, I often carry a hot water bottle with me because I'm often cold. And I went to a market, and upon arriving at this market, no one was in the market. It was completely empty. There was an older woman behind the counter, and I asked her for hot water. After asking her for hot water, she said, "We don't sell it." And I said, "Okay, well, may I buy coffee?" She said again, "We don't sell it." And I was staring at the hot water heater, the dispenser. And I said, "Well, there's hot water right here. May I just pour some?" And she yelled at me and told me to leave the store immediately. And I said, "Wait, are you refusing to serve me water because I'm black?" And this is in North Beach in San Francisco. And then she yells at me again and tells me to leave the store. And I was really flush with so many feelings because I had never experienced this interaction before. I had only heard about it. And to me, it seems really, it just seems like something that shouldn't have been taking place in 2018. This happened just last year. And I walked out of the store. She followed me out of the store with the phone in her hand. And she was calling the police. And to the police, she said, "A black man just stole from me." And so there were a number of things running through my head. A, she was refusing to serve me because I was black. B, she was misgendering me and assuming that I was a man. And I don't know if you all are familiar, surely you are, about the violence against black men in particular in America. And so as someone who's been woman identified most of my life, now mostly non-binary, to be clearly identified as a man through someone else's perception was really jarring and violative, and a really visceral bodily reaction I had in that moment was like shaking. I didn't know how else to react. And I had this moment where I was wondering if I should go and like leave the scene or if I should stay and claim my innocence. Now, I think one of the things that occurred to me is that if I'd stayed, I could have been harmed or put in jail or, arrested. A number of options. But I left. I left immediately because I knew that I had no other option. So this happened to work its way into my work and my practice in some way, because I then went and interviewed a number of black men in my community about the first time they realized they were black, and a man in particular. Because I think that experience for me was the first time that I had realized that I was a black man to someone else. And the first time that I had ever encountered danger in that way. Now, in the institution, and especially within the arts institution, when I recall this encounter, it's often met with surprise. I think a lot of people are surprised that I would be identified as a man to someone who was obviously European, because she also was not American. She was European. What country, I'm not sure. But it's often met with, "Wow, really? I didn't know that happened." It's like, well, this is the unfortunate reality. And I think people have an incongruous experience of race and gender discrimination because they only see it mediated through the screen, through their cell phone, through their computer, through their television, and oftentimes they don't have to encounter it in real life. And to meet someone or to be in community with someone who has had that violence happen to them and have it be very present is something that is often like really hard to process. But I think people try really hard to give space to that conversation. Now, I think we are always trying to negotiate our language and the ways that we identify people within the arts institutions, and I think that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, both within and outside of all institutions. I think by nature of who I am, my work, my practice, and who I am in the world is intersectional in many ways. First, I identify as an African American. Sometimes I identify as Black. My father is Liberian. My mother is African American, meaning she was born in the States, so she's a Black identified American. My dad is Black identified African. And I'm queer, non-binary. And a lot of those politics often are present in my work in many different ways. I'm a curator, a writer, and a visual artist. As a curator, I think it's become extremely vital for me to invite artists who explore intersectionality in their work. And I think by nature of how my community has expanded and who I know and who I've been lucky enough to work with, a lot of those people don't have to force that within their work. Like a lot of Black artists, especially Black artists in America, don't have to really think about intersectionality. For example, I just curated a show at SFAI called Vanguard Revisited at the Walter McBean Gallery, and it was called Vanguard Revisited: Poetic Politics in Black Futures. And I invited Tasha Stemage, Keija Lucas, Chris Martin, and 5/5 Collective to create a contemporary exhibition that would be in conversation with the Black Panther photographs by Ruth Marion and Purple Jones. And something that I found really important for that exhibition was to invite younger artists, younger contemporary artists, to be in dialogue with what organizing in the 60s looked like. So what is the translation, the mode of translation for artists in the Bay Area, for Black artists in particular, to think about political work? Does it need to be something that's completely didactic? Does it need to be something that's explicitly political? Does it need to say does it need to have really public-facing language? I'm refraining from naming the president right now because I think there are many other creative ways to do it. But a lot of these artists are pushing up against those expectations of what political work can look like. And they have a range of practices and a range of backgrounds. Not all of them are, queer identified or cis identified. A lot of them consider the symbology of Blackness and political work in many different ways. For example, Keija Lucas, who happens to be one of the older artists, in her practice, at least in the show, and she takes these objects and distills them into these very distinct moments where they're isolated, and you see an image of a brick in it, and having an image of a brick allows you to focus and say, what is the history of something like this? What is the history of this object? How many ways can I consider the use of this brick in both practical matters, and political matters, and poetic matters? For the Panthers, I'm sure a brick is used to build a home, to build their organization's headquarters. It's also used to destroy. And when you see a lot of the images of the Black Panthers, you see images of bullet holes because of the police violence. So a lot of bullets were piercing the brick buildings during that time. And in particular, Keija Lucas's work is looking at that brick as a representation of home and construction and destruction within the Black context. Five Fifths Collective looks at the home in a very different way. It's almost like a taxonomy of the home. They record these moments where they find couches on the street and think about the homes and the families that have been displaced in Oakland because of gentrification, and what it means when we see a single chair or a single couch laying on the street and who that once belonged to. Something else that I think about often in my work in terms of intersectionality is how can I talk about the Black experience in my visual practice without only using Black bodies, because I think the conversation of race is something that should be inclusive of all voices. I don't believe that looking at Blackness or making work about Black bodies should only exist in a vacuum. So I'll often invite people who are white identified to participate in the work, because I think that is just as much a part of the deconstruction of race politics. And a lot of people kind of push back or give me a little bit of controversy because they don't want to see white bodies. They're tired of seeing white bodies be within the conversation of racial politics. However, I think that they can exist separately. Everyone is an active participant. Claudia Rankin says everyone is included in the act of violence, whether you're Black, Asian, Mexican, white. Everyone is included within the violence that is language, how we identify each other. What if you refer to me as Black can be just as violent as me referring to you as white, because we're naming each other. And we are still highlighting the distance between us, or the difference. And I think that right now a lot of artists, a lot of writers, a lot of thinkers are trying to negotiate and work through what it means to acknowledge that difference while still, giving someone respect. Also while still acknowledging that naming that difference means creating or reinforcing separatist politics to a certain extent. I think institutions are finding it really difficult right now because not only the public, but the community. There's a community of artists and thinkers and writers really pushing up against how institutions are run, and I think that they are having a really difficult time negotiating what to do about it, because for so long they've been operating within this standard of inviting only cisgendered white men to participate, to the point where I think it's just natural. They don't have to think about it. It's like you think of someone to invite, you're like, oh, Jeff Koons, of course. It's easy. And so when you're asked to do work outside of your purview, outside of your understanding, I think you're left feeling incompetent. And it is highly incompetent for institutions to completely ignore groups of people. So I think having to deal with that internal struggle of feeling incompetent, not knowing what to do, feeling uncomfortable having conversations about race and gender and sexuality and disability is probably frightening. But I think that a lot of institutions do need to be put in the space of discomfort in order to deconstruct that. I think that, well, at least what I'm seeing a lot of institutions in the Bay Area do is think through what it means to invite artists or people of color, queer people, to be in positions of power in the institution. So what does it mean to have an Asian American woman be an executive director of an organization? What does it mean to have a queer Islamic man be a president or a CEO of an arts organization? I think those are the questions that need to be asked, and those are the steps that need to be taken in order to really make change in institutions, because then the people who you are bringing into power will then act naturally, right? So they will invite the people in their communities. And that's how you work that in. I mean, I don't expect a white cis man to be able to identify me and know my work. I mean, it takes a lot of work. I think that should be expected to happen over time. But I think the easiest method for institutions right now is to have someone like me be in a position of power so that I can invite the people that I know, because I've already done that work. So being able to financially support these conversations and support people in positions of power to make real change is what needs to happen, and is what is starting to happen. I think that I've had a lot of difficulties with the word feminism, actually, because historically my understanding of feminism was from the perspective of white women, and I don't think that's to anyone's surprise, but having that be the foundation of most of the feminist discourse in America makes it really difficult for me to have an entry point into that discourse, into those theoretical practices. And I think what's happening is that people are starting to re-identify their politics or redefine feminism. I would say that my politics are more queer politics. I don't actually feel the need to identify as a feminist. I definitely think that I have feminist practices. I mean, I love, I think if I were to name someone who has been instrumental in the ways that I think is Bell Hooks, that's one of the main Black feminists that we have in America to look to. Roxane Gay. These are two people who have really expounded on Black feminist politics. And for me, being a woman, being Black, being queer, and having pronouns that are she, they, he, already is working in concert with feminist politics, but also is growing that into what it means to be queer and what it means to have queer politics.